How to polyurethane a floor. Scott Rodriguez, Kingdom Creations. First, you do one of these numbers all the way around the floor. All the way around. I've already done that everywhere. I don't know if you can see it on this video. I've already done it around the edges. Then, the roller. Of course, at this point, I have already sanded the floor with 320. 220 works. I like 320. I vacuumed it, and I used a slightly damp towel all over the floor. Now you do this. You don't need to work it a lot. You don't need to go back and forth a lot. Just need to do a little bit. Just enough to get it covered all the way. Super hard to do it with one hand, you know? Let me get some Google glasses or some of those new glasses so I can do this with two hands while taking a video. Alright, I'm gonna set this down for a second. I'm trying to get it as smooth as I can, as little bubbles as I can. The Lambswool applicator works better. It's the gold standard when it comes to putting down these floors. But on the last one, I went so deep. And then I just decided on this one, since this is my house, I'm not going to go that deep on it. Roller does a pretty good job. It just leaves a little bit of an orange peel down. Put it down real thin, that helps out a lot. Anyway, you can see polyurethane. That's what it looks like when you first put it down. Pushing a little harder, doing it with one hand, so it's a little hard. So if you go real slow, be careful with it, it goes down a little bit smoother. You just basically want the weight of the roller on it. Like I said, it's not a Lambswool applicator, but if you don't play with it too much, you don't get too much of the bubbles. Anyway, that's what we're doing. The thing I like about this applicator is since you're rolling, you're not dragging, so you don't have to go in line with the grain. Piece of trash in there. There we go, I got it. I'll put it in my pocket. But you don't have to go with the grain when you're rolling. The key is just, you want it thin. Alright, you see how it kind of gets to a place where it's kind of hard to get it to cover? You have to go past a few times. That's how you know when you got it thin enough. If you get it too thick, you get all those bubbles and they pop, there's still enough material on there, we have a problem. Another piece of trash in here. Almost after vacuuming twice, wiping. Anyway, so just keep on going with it. You want it real thin like, where it's kind of hard to get it to cover. And that's how you get it where you don't get a bunch of bubbles. Because if it's a thin film, then those bubbles will pop during the drying process because they're small bubbles. If it's a thick film, then you have the opportunity for those bubbles to get solid in there. So that's one roller dip, that far with one roller dip. Okay, with a 1/4 inch roller. That kind of gives you an idea on film thickness. You see it smooths out. The micro bubbles that are in there will pop because they're so thin. And here's another thing I like to do after I'm done with this per section. I'll go over the whole thing real carefully, like with very light pressure. Just to make sure if there's any high spots or if there's any dry spots, you push a little harder. Or if you see any white coming through, like I have right there, you go a little harder. But just make sure in your final pass, they get everything evened out. All right, time for the next pass. So loading your roller, kind of like this, you get it all the way around. Don't make too much bubbles. Right here, you just get it even all the way around it. And then we'll do the next section. I'll probably bring it midway through the closet. Okay, so your first roll puts down a lot. So smear it out a little bit. So you're sure you got it even all the way across. And then just smear it out. And obviously you're going to want to go at least one board into the section you already did. Now you can see next to the edge while we use the paintbrush. So you don't have to get right up on it and get chemical on your edge. You see any funny looking spots? Look like you got a different color wood? It's because it's dry. It takes I don't know, about 20 seconds for it to wet in. And now at this point, I got the chemical dispersed. I'm going real light again, just to get rid of any of those bubbles or those high spots, unless I find a light spot. Then I'll go a little harder. Other than that, you're going light enough that you're really not producing much in the way of lines or porosity or bubbles or anything like that. Just going real light. Remember, this stuff is going to cure, and over the next 4 to 8 hours, it will pop. You don't want to use a fan to force dry this. It'll mess you up in the long run. But if you get anywhere when you're rolling it, or you get some bubbles like that, you know that's a heavy spot. So you gotta roll it out. Like I said, the lamb's wool applicator super dry seems to be the best way to do it without bubbles. With this, you can see you have a slight texture to it. But most people don't care. It's pretty close. But it does give it a slight orange peel. The lamb's wool applicator doesn't do that, but it's much harder to control the thickness of your material. About ready for the next stripe. Oh, I didn't pause it. Crap, wasted video. Well, if you get anything like this, you're pushing too hard. Bugger, I'm sorry I didn't pause it. I'll go ahead and finish the video now. As I do it, I can see I got too much material in here, see? The bubbles are way too pronounced. I need to smear this out. A little bit lacking. I'm gonna go back in here where I started. There's more material and pick up some of it. And then come back out here. And there's enough to finish my stripe. Obviously you want a Mohs hair roller. That's far better. You don't want to do it too thin when you got dry spots. But you don't want to play with the material too much either. It's a fine balance between having it dry enough where it doesn't bubble on you, but wet enough where you don't leave any dry spots. You're looking for any kind of discoloration in the floor that doesn't look normal. That's what tells you got the dry spots. Remember, it takes a minute for it to wet in. You gotta give it a second. Then come back and check. That's why I always come back and do a real lightweight roll before I move on from a section. To make sure I don't miss anything. And I have an even pass. If you say good enough and smear it on there, you're gonna have dry spots and wet spots. You have to actually take the time to smear the material around in the proper manner without pushing too hard after you're done. I know I'm repeating myself here. And if you have any trash in there, make sure you get it out. And get your finger spot. See, that's what I mean when I say discoloration. You have a little dry spot there. Got in there and get that wet. Push a little harder. Get it wet, and then it'll wet in. So there's my next section, not as deep because it's wider. And I'm gonna come back over here and come this way in order to maintain a wet edge. Maintain that wet edge. Now I might come back to my next section. And again, don't forget your evening out pass. You can see I have some dry spots over here. Get those suckers in there. You need it thin. This material's got to be put down thin. It's super important. You have a minimum thickness, but it's pretty easy to get your minimum thickness. It's pretty hard to get too little. Or, I'm sorry, pretty hard to get too little. Getting too much is what most people have a problem with. You can protect against that, again, by just doing a lightweight roll. Just the weight of the roller on this. Just to make sure that it's nice and even. Super important. If you have a dry spot anywhere, you kind of go sideways, get in there a little bit, and roll it right back out, real light. Roll it out real light on the final pass. A little dry spot right there where there's a hole. See how it went dark? I got it. And again, come back and hit your other spot to maintain that wet edge. Don't want to let it go dry. All right, one last section and then out the door. This one, since this is my dry side, I'm going to start with my wet over here and kind of smear it out. It's not as wide, not same as that. So I'll be able to come further, but I gotta get all the way up to that edge first. I usually leave a dry spot, get in there, make sure I get this edge right. Now for my evening coat, not evening, but evening, making it even, hitting any dry spots. Anywhere there's a little bit of white from the powder and the sanding comes through, this is your final time to check it and get it wet. You don't want stuff to lay on top of it, you want it to be fully wet so it disappears and just looks like that black line. If you don't get it all the way, like this, you'll have a white spot. But if you get in there, you get that chemical in there, see how it turns wet and disappears? I might need a little bit more on that because my roll is already dry. I'll make sure I hit that spot first with a wet roller. Last chance. Behind the door, dry spots, and then I'm out the room. Now it's very important, you don't shake this stuff. When you stir it real gentle. When you pour it, you don't pour it from any higher than you need to. And you give it a little while for all the bubbles to come up. And when you're doing your thing in, there's trash in the bottom you picked up. Just stay at the top so you don't get any trash back on your roller. You want all this stuff to sink to the bottom. And then don't reuse this stuff. It's not that expensive, just chuck it out. Try not to put too much in your paint tray to throw out. Get it wetted in all the way. Keep moving. Remember, this part might be trying to get dry now, so don't go too deep into it. If you're slow at this, it's important to maintain a wet edge. So you kind of have to go back over it like we were doing earlier in this section. And again, if you're getting bubbles like this, you got too much, you're gonna keep smearing it out. And one last final smooth out. Make sure that everything's good. It is a good idea to put a little bit extra in the walkway. You get a lot of traffic right there. The way you do that is just tiny little right there, twice. Just a tiny little bit like that. A little bit extra in the walkway. See how you get those bubbles again? Because there's so much in on there. That's how you know you got too much. But I like a little bit extra on my walkway. So I'll roll that out. And I'll deal with any porosity or bubbles that show up because I want a little extra protection right here. Anyway, that's it, folks. High gloss polyurethane. Doesn't do quite the same job that the lamb's wool does. You get a little bit of texture in there, but gosh, unless you're a perfectionist, ain't nobody gonna see it. They just see beautiful, shiny, and it's much easier to get it the right thickness this way. Anyway,
Hope that helps. I wear a mask because I just don't like the smell. You don't really need it, but you wouldn't want to smell this stuff all day. It is oil-based chemical. Anyway, hope that helps. Take care. God bless. Bye.